Not only can you see the future,
I can change it.
Skeleton! 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 Skeleton!
I was there, I saw it. I saw his face. I stood there. I did nothing.
Hey everyone, what's going on? Back with another Stephen King book review. Today we are discussing one of the first Castle Rock books in the line of Stephen King books that I'm reading in chronological order, and that is The Dead Zone. The Dead Zone is filled with a lot of different occurrences that happen throughout the story, whether it's with the main character, which we will get to in a second, whether it's with, what goes on in the story, the storyline, what happens in the end. It's just a lot of different things that coexist in this book. Everything that you read in The Dead Zone is actually really interesting because it leaves you on the edge of your seat, and there's cases where the story takes a wicked twist. So let's jump right into this book. So as I was discussing the main character, we are talking about John Smith. He goes by Johnny. So I am not talking about the John Smith that appears in Pocahontas. That's not the one I'm talking about right now, but we are talking about actually Johnny Smith. But before we discuss what is actually really unique about Johnny is we actually have to go back to his childhood. So as a child, he is in an ice skating incident where again he gets knocked on the head, kind of. There's no concussion, doesn't get raced to the hospital or nothing. He kind of just like gets this little crowd that circles around him, finds out, he gets up like 10 minutes later and he goes back to skating. He's just fine, which is really interesting because as you fast forward to the story, which happens in 1970, he is now a school teacher. As I mentioned, there's a lot of things that happen in the story, but what specifically happens to Johnny is now one night he is with his girlfriend Sarah at this nice little fair, and they are, having a good time. And then before they leave, because Sarah's not feeling well, they both stop by this Wheel of Fortune where this guy is actually obviously, he's trying to con to get their money, and it's just, kind of like a roulette wheel in a sense, but he spins it like this, and Johnny puts his betting on, a certain number or a certain color or a certain odd or even number. What's really interesting about this part, and again, it's really interesting because I actually love, anything that deals with poker or, roulette's fun too, as I can see this in my head while I'm reading and while I'm listening to the Audible, which is really cool because it is narrated by none other than James Franco, which I am a big fan of his work. Anyways, with the wheel spinning, he is actually predicting the numbers and the colors, odd numbers, whichever one you're talking about, on the dot. This event that is happening is actually stirring a crowd, and they are watching Johnny as he's getting unbelievably lucky with his winnings as they see through their eyes, but in his way, he just is wondering what the hell is going on. So after he takes away a whopping like $500 or so, I think, on the winnings, he takes Sarah home. After he takes Sarah home, he is actually taking a cab back to his place. This is where he gets really crazy because on his way back, he gets into a crazy head-on collision accident where two cars are drag racing towards him, and the taxi driver is, preoccupied with talking to Johnny on the way, and they don't see it, and Johnny goes flying through the windshield, and it's just nuts because as he ends up in the hospital, Sarah, comes to visit. His family, his mother and father are in distraught. His mother is very religious. She believes that God will be the one to save his life and to bring him back because he is in a coma. And I don't mean just a coma for about a couple weeks or a month. He is in a coma for 4.5 years. As Johnny is in the coma, so many things are happening. Sarah obviously has moved on. She has gotten married and has a kid. Johnny's mother and father, Herb and Vera, they get really, distraught about this, especially the mother, because she is going on, I don't know what you want to call them, kind of location sites where she is trying to find, obviously not herself, but a way of, praying to God and trying to find a way to bring Johnny back. Herb is very, frustrated with her and frustrated with the whole situation, and he just wants to give up and he wants to pull the plug on Johnny, but Vera will not have that at all. Also, while Johnny is in a coma, there's the political side of this book, which again, I will give my rating later, but this is the part I really didn't find interesting much about The Dead Zone. There's this man named Stilson. He is running for some kind of political office, and again, while Johnny is in the coma, he is going and trying to do everything he can to win votes before the election actually happens. And then suddenly, when all hope is lost and everyone thinks that there's no hope for it, Johnny actually comes with it. He awakens from his coma after 4.5 years. He is just so in the blur of what has happened and what is currently happening. So with months of physical therapy and obviously trying to get his legs back, trying to give his movements back, but what is happening with this accident is anytime Johnny touches someone or someone touches Johnny, whether it be on the shoulder or if they touch hands like it's a handshake, Johnny can kind of see the future in a sense. He can visualize certain specific occurrences that are happening, whether it's with the person they touch, the family, or what is going to happen soon later on in the future later on down the road. So that's the part about Johnny, you know, the very unique kind of power, if you want, in a sense, and he has no idea what is going on. People think it's some kind of fluke. It's not real. He's just doing this for, you know, the public, which he's not. The news reporters, the media, you name it, they try to get in there, try to talk, try to pick Johnny's brain, and Johnny just doesn't want to have anything to do with it, so he's trying to push them away as well. Now, the reason why it's called the dead zone is because when Johnny has certain visuals or premonitions of what's going to happen, there's certain parts where he can't actually pick out what is going to occur, and this is where it's called the dead zone. He kind of can't figure out numbers or, you know, street names or certain specifics like that, but sometimes they do come to him. But when it's obviously throughout the book and he's trying to figure out and trying to help out people with what's happening, he says, oh, it's in the dead zone. Kind of like a blocked out from his mind. So in addition, with Johnny, you know, finding out about his dead zone power, Stilson trying to run for some kind of political power. Again, I really don't care so much for about that part in this book. But then what's really happening is there's a detective named George Bannerman. And again, as Johnny was in a coma and when he comes out of the coma, certain things are happening around Castle Rock because there is a serial killer on the loose known as the Castle Rock Strangler. So as he's known as the Castle Rock Strangler, he is known that for grabbing his victims, raping them, and strangling them until they are dead, and when he obviously pleasures himself. Very sick, twisted guy that's out there on the run. There are certain murders that are happening throughout the story, and then George Bannerman is here because he wants to talk to Johnny to try to figure out if they can find this killer. So as you wrap all of this into one story, there's again so many things that are occurring. What Stephen King does very well about this, which I like, each individual event that he writes about is very specific, and again, it isn't drawn on. Now there are parts, I will admit, that are drawn on, you know, in a certain sense, but not the whole story itself. It's very quick pace. It's very easy to understand. And obviously, if you are into the political part of this book, then it will make sense to you. It makes sense to me as well, but I fucking hate politics. I'm sorry. I can't stand them. So as we fast forward nearly in the middle and to the end of the book, I'm not going to mention about, obviously, what happens with the Castle Rock Strangler, what happens with Stilson, if he wins the election or doesn't he, and what Johnny actually has to do at the end is really, really hard on himself because there is so much pressure with him and this dead zone power that he has. So as you keep going page by page throughout the book, you will see that normalcy doesn't exist in this book. Everything that happens occurs for a reason, and you will see that Johnny is involved with the whole part of it as he's in the center of it. So my overall rating for this book is 4 stars. Like I mentioned, the politics, I don't need to get into that as much because I actually talked about that back in the stand. So if you haven't checked out the stand review, I will leave that also. Politics, not a fan of it. So if Stephen King would have actually made this mainly about politics, I probably would not have given this a great rating. But again, 4 stars overall. I did enjoy it because of the serial killer part of it and obviously Johnny's power with the dead zone. That was really cool. And I just love the overall interaction between the characters that Johnny has, the friends that he meets, and also in addition that not only does he obviously come out of the coma and try to relive his life, but once he comes out of the coma, he doesn't really get back into teaching. So what he actually does is he does a one-on-one tutoring, and that's actually a big kind of like opening to his eyes of, you know, life and perspective itself, because later on you will see once you finish the dead zone that it all adds up in the end. All right, everyone, that is it. Please comment in the comments below if you have ever read the Dead Zone, if you want to read the Dead Zone. And I also haven't mentioned though, but this is an adaptation. It has featured Christopher Walken. Christopher Walken is a very funny actor, but in this adaptation, he obviously plays Johnny Smith. And again, he does a pretty interesting job of it too. So if you haven't checked out the adaptation, it's a pretty good one, but I think I like the book better than the adaptation. Like I always mention, my friends, thank you very much for all the support that you keep doing. Again, little by little, getting to the 1,000 mark. It's not an easy task, but again, if you could spread the word of my channel, let everyone know, whether it's on social media or just in person, I would be very, very grateful. And just kind of reach out. Obviously, if you want to talk to me, comment in the comments below. You know the drill if you follow me, if you are obviously a constant subscriber. And if you are new to my channel, please don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button. And like I always say, my friends and my new viewers, please read your book cover to cover. We'll see y'all later.